All right, in today's lesson, we're going to look at a second kind of paragraph. Last week, we focused on the summary paragraph. In this lesson, we're going to focus on taking a deep dive and really examining one aspect of a text. So remember, analysis focuses in on one specific idea. So we're going to look at the infographic Why Read again. And I've asked you to analyze or to look deeply at one of the 10 reasons. I want you to choose the one that's the most important or meaningful to you, and then write a paragraph that explains your thinking and include a correctly embedded quote. So as you can see, anytime you're given a prompt, at some point in your writing, you're going to need to write an analysis paragraph to analyze and answer the question in the prompt. So I'm going to go over my example here. Because I'm thinking about this paragraph as a standalone all by itself, I've included the important information in the topic sentence again. You won't have to do this if you've already introduced the text in a previous summary paragraph, which is how you will usually do it. So I'm going to look starting here. It says, I wrote, Gallagher uses both facts, such as statistics, about how reading improves student test scores, as well as quotes from literature and scholarly articles. So this is kind of an overview. I'm examining the support. I'm examining the evidence here of what he has offered. And here's where I really start to take my deep dive. But the fact that resonates with me the most is the connection between literacy and poverty. So this is my specific answer to the prompt. This is what I really want to look at. I really want to analyze this idea that literacy is directly correlated to poverty. Because as a teacher, if I can encourage literacy and reading comprehension and stamina and speed and all of those skills, then I've really made a difference in my students' lives, in their ability to live well and have a good life. So I'm going to start with my quote here. Here's what he says. Gallagher states, comma, so I've used the quote, embedded quote technique number 2. Almost 50% of people with lowest literacy skills live in poverty. 14.5% of Americans with poor reading skills are underemployed. And I think what he means there is that people who could be making more money but can't, they're underemployed because their reading level is so low. So here's the quote that I'm using, and now I'm going to start my analysis. As a teacher, this is shocking because it brings home how reading affects my students' economic future. Reading proficiency has an impact well beyond the classroom and well beyond high school. So the prompt asked me what was the most significant reason why reading is important. And here I'm giving my analysis of why that's important. Gallagher's illustrations about the positive effects of reading highlights both objective facts and subjective opinions to bring home his argument that reading is essential for future success. And so that's my conclusion. So I've kind of looked at two things here. I've analyzed how he's used statistics and quotes. I've picked out the one reason that I think is the most important, and I've discussed why that's important to me. So this is my analysis paragraph. So now what I want you to do is the same thing I did. Look at one of the reasons, provide a quote, talk about why that's important, why you believe that reason is important, and then write a conclusion. Okay, so we've looked at infographics, we have answered a prompt, we have summarized, and now we're ready to take all those skills that we've practiced and apply them to our first article. And it's about reading. This is the last final part of our reading unit. We'll do one of these each quarter. Usually you'll have a choice. Next quarter you'll have a choice on the article that you are going to use. But this one we're going to do together so that we all have a chance to practice. So basically, you're going to highlight the main idea in pink. So I'm going to read through here. Marianne Wolf needs to test a hypothesis. I don't know who she is yet. Oh, she's a long-time researcher on how reading on screens changes the brain, and not for the better. She was coming to suspect that that's what she'd been warning others about had happened to her. Her test was simple. Reread Hermann Hesse's Magister Ludi. And then it goes on to talk about that. So I think this is an important idea here. I'm not sure if it's the important idea, but I'm going to highlight it. I'm going to go up to the highlighter here and pick something pink. Well, that looks pretty pink to me. Okay. So maybe right now I'm thinking the main idea here is how reading on screens changes the brain and not for the better. So now I want to keep reading. I might see that there's a better choice, but I'm also looking for some supporting topics. She had read it when she was young and loved it and was gleefully looking forward to it until, that is, she actually sat down and opened the book. Granted, it's a dense, complex novel, but still reading it was the literary equivalent of a punch to the cortex. Notice how that quote is embedded using technique number 3. And it looks like she recorded all of this struggle that she went through in a book, Reader Come Home. Scanning all those emails and browsing all those articles online had indeed taken a toll. She simply couldn't sustain what she calls deep reading. I think this is an important idea, and it looks like 3 supporting ideas in yellow, at least 3. So I'm going to say that seems like an important idea to me. I'm going to put yellow on that. She couldn't sustain her deep reading, and there's a quote where she talks about that. So I'm going to do that too. It was an object lesson for her that no one is immune to the downside of reading screens. I believe that the reading brain is changing imperceptibly, she said. Imperceptibly, I'm not really sure what that means, so let me go down and take a look. Oh, there's my look list. Oh, there it is. Imperceptibly, in a way that is so slight, gradual, or... Oh, okay. All right, so it just slightly, she means just slightly. Her brain was changing slightly. The glut of information that we are bombarded with is actually changing how we read. This skimming, browsing, word spotting way of reading on digital screens is bleeding over all of what we are reading. I think this is important right here. And maybe we'll just do this whole quote. I think this quote is also very important because she's saying that we're reading in a different way. We're skimming, we're browsing, we're word spotting, and it's affecting how we normally read. So I think that's important. This talks about who she is. She's an expert on dyslexia. So this is all telling us why we should believe her. And in persuasive techniques, we would call this the ethos, right? We've got somebody who's reliable. And she's talking about her books. She's talking about the development of reading. This seems like a lot of background. I would call this part of the paper that summary. Remember, we were talking about summary fills in the reader on information that they don't know. So that's all that summary. For most of us, that means reading many hours a day on the screen, which also involves processing a lot of information. Doing that isn't just building bad reading habits, but affecting the brain and how we read. I think that's important right there. I'm going to highlight it. What can we do about it? Well, now we're going to look at the part of the article that says, how can we correct this? She started to retrain herself to be immersed in the book. During the process, my world slowed down just a little as I recovered my lost way of reading. I'm going to quote that. Looks really important. So the way to fix it is just to read, to improve our stamina. Make time for deep reading. So she has this term deep reading. I'm going to highlight that. Deep reading, which allows for critical analysis. She's got another term here. It's a start toward becoming what Woolf calls a biliterate reading brain, capable of deeper, more sustained reading across any medium. So I think what she's saying here is that we need both, right? We need to be able to skim and digest digital text, but we should not lose our deeper, sustained reading skills. I think that makes sense. Here's some recommendations for kids, for different age groups. And we're kind of doing this one from ages 5 to 10, parallel tracks for learning to read. So we are reading on screen today, and we also read in our books. There's a no one approach that fits every child. There is always an individual element. Okay, I'm going to highlight that. That sounds important. Woolf saves her most trenchant. I don't know what trenchant means. Let's look that up. Trenchant. Sharply perceptive. Okay, so that sounds like the word insightful also, that I know. Woolf saves her most insightful criticism of the digital reading brain for its effects, not on society at large. The last thing I ever thought was that I, as a cognitive neuroscientist, would come to the conclusion that this work is imperative, of vital importance for society to understand for the sake of democracy, she said. How we read has changed to such a degree that it encourages only the most superficial thought and the most superficial sources of information. Wow, I think this paragraph is very important. So she's talking about the negative effects of digital reading and our loss of deep reading and how that affects society. That makes me think back to the Why Read infographic, where Kelly Gallagher talked about the societal effects of reading. And here we have that again. I think that's interesting. The complexity of argument and thought is being lost, so that the end of deep reading, which is critical analysis, empathy, and ultimately a contemplative look at the truth, doesn't happen. Ooh, I think that's also important. I've got more than 3 things that I've thought that are supporting ideas here. I might go back and re-look at this so that I just have 3. The result in the past, she added, has been demagoguery. I don't know what that means. Political activity or practices that seek to support by appealing to the desires of prejudices of ordinary people. Well, I can see that happening in our society right now, I think. It's just a lot of lies being told about violent mobs and trying to scare people. I think I see a little bit about that. If we in the 21st century are to preserve a vital collective conscience, we must ensure that all members of our society are able to read and think both deeply and well. So this article that started out just talking about digital reading versus what she calls deep reading, she really has an important insight for us as a society here at the end. I'm thinking more about how important this article is. All right, so I'm going to go back now and I'm going to look through my supporting ideas here and see, do I really need all of these? It looks like I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I've got 8 main supporting ideas. So my job is to go back and say, well, maybe what are the 3 most important of those? And those are the ones that I'm going to discuss in my summary.